I'm Lydia and I work for Westcountry Rivers Trust. In this series of films we'll talk you through signing up to our Westcountry Citizen Science Investigation Scheme.
Hello, and I'm Simon Browning. I work at Westcountry Rivers Trust too, and I'm just here to tell you a little bit about the CSI scheme. It started 5 years ago, and our aim really is to get people out monitoring their local rivers all across the West Country. We have 850 plus water bodies to look after, and a lot of those don't get any other monitoring if you don't do it. So yeah, please help out and watch these set of videos, and that'll help you get started.
So when you come to do your dry run survey, the first thing you need to work out is whether your site is safe and accessible to access. So is it on a public pathway or a bridge crossing the river, or is it on private land? And if it is on private land, either find somewhere that's more publicly accessible, or if you can get landowner permission, that's fine. You next need to work out whether it's safe to take a full sample at the site. So you need to be able to take a bucket full of water, either safely from a bridge or from the banks of the river. If all of those things are fine for you for your site, then you can go ahead and carry out your dry run survey. All you're doing is filling out and following our CSI survey form. The first thing you'll do is fill out the survey details. First thing, site name, what is your river or stream called? So I have here on the river Sprat, so that's what I will write. The next thing you need to do is find out what your location name is called. You may well have been given this when you first signed up. Here I'm in Heel Valley. You also need your grid reference. This can be worked out from your phone, which might be able to give you a good reference, or alternatively there are plenty of good websites online, or even you can just use our cartographer survey form, which will do it for you as well. We then need our date and time and your name. The next thing is our water body type. So you need to know whether it's a river, stream, lake, pond or estuary, or it might be another. For this one it's just a stream, and then we also need to work out whether we've had rain in the previous 24 hours. So for that we can look online, or if we know, then we can use our own knowledge. The next part of our form is the general ecosystem observations. So this is merely just what you're seeing in our surrounding landscape. First of all, what is the dominant land use within 50 metres? So here we can tick multiple boxes, however I would limit it to what the dominant land use is. So for us, we've got woodland definitely on the right hand side of our bank, so that's an obvious one, and then on the left hand side of the bank we just have green fields, so we have grassland pasture. So those are two very obvious things. Dominant bankside vegetation, so this again, you can click multiple here, but we try to encourage you to go for what is dominant, and for here it's trees and shrubs. Our problem plant species, we have a number of options here for you which are known problem plants in the West Country. However, if there is others that you know of and they're in your local area, then please do put them in the other section. For us here, we have plenty of Himalayan balsam, so we can tick that one. We then move on to the wildlife spotted. Now, it's sometimes not so easy to spot wildlife when you're standing right by the river, because they will often be disturbed by your presence. However, we do encourage you just to sit and wait and watch and see what you can find at your sample site, because they often appear if you're nice and silent. We're now on to evidence of pollution. So first of all, we want you to have a look and see if there are any pollution sources within 50 metres of your sample site. It's important to emphasise here that we're looking at sources of the pollution. So if you can't see the source, then please do not tick anything. So for us here, we don't have any outfalls in our vicinity, so we can leave that. We don't have any farmland or cattle accessing the river, so we're actually ticking none for this site. For our evidence of recent pollution, this is what you can see in the river that might indicate that a pollution has gone through recently. Stuff like sewage, fungus and litter, unpleasant odour, they're all indicators that something nasty has passed through. For us here, it's none again. Lastly, for our dry run, we move on to our river channel observations. First of all, we need an estimate of the width and the depth at our sample site. So it's important here to emphasise that it's just an estimation, and we're not encouraging you to get in the river and do a very detailed width and depth. However, if you have a look at your river channel, have a look at, imagine a width of a metre ruler, and work out how many of those it will cover. And the same with the depth. Imagine that you're measuring depth at the far side, the middle and the near side, and get an average of what you think it would be. We then go into the flow conditions. So this is how fast the river is moving that day, and it gives you a little indication of what we're looking for when we're saying surging, steady, slow and still. It's to do with how fast you're walking, so you can almost walk along the river if you can to estimate that. We have our obstacles to fish or flow here as well, so if there is anything obvious, such as a debris dam or a weir, then you can pop that down here. Water level is quite a difficult one initially when you start your surveying, and you might want to go on and have a look at how much rainfall you've had recently to work out whether you're high, average or low. But the more you do your surveying, the more you'll understand your river and what state it's in. Finally, we'll have a look at the predominant substrate. So again, it's important to emphasise here we're looking at the predominant, so you can only tick one. So just make sure you have a look around, and it might be that you have gravels and stones and silt and mud, but what's the predominant one? And for us here, it's stones. The final section that we get you to fill out is our notes. This is actually a really important section. If you have any doubt about anything that you're seeing, pop it in the notes. If you've got something that might need explaining, then pop it in the notes. And all of those notes that you pop in and then input into Cartographer, we will see when we approve your survey. So it's a really important section and one that we take note of. If you can, we ask you to take photos during your survey. One of them should be a fixed point photo of the same spot every time you survey, and that way we can have a look at change over time. The other sections all have a photograph next to them, the ones that we would like you to photograph. So for example, in the problem plant species, if you are seeing Himalayan balsam or Japanese knotweed, for example, you would take a picture so that we can have a look and verify it for you. Same with wildlife. Obviously it's very difficult sometimes to capture wildlife, so don't worry too much about that. Pollution's really important. If you can get a picture of it, to upload it so that we can verify and have a look and give us context to your survey. Anything else that you're not sure of, just take a picture of it and send it to us, and we can have a look at and pass it on to anyone within the trust that might be able to help out. Once you've finished your dry run, you can then go back and upload it to Cartographer. Don't worry about the fact that you won't have water quality results. We know that, and it helps us identify you for the kit for the next month. So all you need to do is upload everything else that you've observed and your site name and location, and then we'll be able to verify your survey and send you a kit out for your next month's survey.
We're going to run through the water quality testing elements now. So I've got my sample from the river, and the first thing we do is the turbidity test. Now it takes just over a litre to fill this, so with a 1.5 litre bucket we'll be able to fill it if we need to. But essentially making sure that you have the tube in your shadow, so the sun isn't directly on it. Then you can pour the water slowly into the tube. It's worth stopping every once in a while to check that you can still clearly see the disc. You'll soon get a feel for what a turbid sample looks like. Still fine. If you get to the top of the tube and you can still see the disc, then you record it as less than 12. If you're somewhere in here, then you can record the number that's nearest where the water level is. So once we've done the turbidity test, we only need a little bit of water. I've only got sort of 2 inches of water in this bucket, because when we're leaving this in here, it's important that this device doesn't get wet beyond the screen there. Really, we want to keep the water level down to about here. So that's been sat in there for a couple of minutes now. because I want to make sure the temperature settles down to the water temperature. The best way to check that is to angle it so you can see, and it's come down now to 17.1 degrees, and if I just watch that for a little while, I normally leave it 30 seconds just to check that that number isn't changing anymore. Then once that number is settled, press the hold button. You'll hear it beep as you let go, and that fixes the result. So now you can take it out of the water and read the numbers off the screen. So I can write on my survey form the temperature is 17.1 degrees. If I press temp one more time, it then tells me the temperature in Fahrenheit. That's reading 62.7. We don't want that. We press temp one more time to move on to the total dissolved solids value, and that's reading 208. You can just see in the bottom corner it's saying ppm. So if it was on Fahrenheit, there's an F in the top corner. The other way to tell is that the total dissolved solids figure doesn't record to a decimal. So if it's got a decimal reading, then you're reading temperature. The next test we're going to do is the phosphate test. But before we do that, we're going to get our TDS probe and our thermometer settling in the water. So if you can pop it in your sample bucket or your sample vessel, it can take a couple of minutes for those to come down to the temperature of the water. So it saves time if you can get that going whilst you're doing your phosphate test. For the phosphate, you'll need your test tube and your syringe, and of course your phosphate test strips. And it's important to first rinse both. So we can take a sample, fill the syringe and discard that. Then fill the test tube, halfway will do. Put the lid on, give it a good shake, discard that too. Then we know that any sample from previous tests is gone and rinsed away. This time, now we can fill the test tube to the 10 milliliter line. It's at the top of the test tube. Get over the top there. And that does need to be quite accurate. Then we can take a strip from the pot. Try not to get your wet fingers inside, just sort of feed one out to you. Bend it into a J shape with the pads facing inwards and pop that into the lid. Then pop the lid on, push it till it clicks, and then invert that 5 times slowly, making sure that the bubble gets to the top each time. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then remove the lid, take the strip and pop that in your pocket, and then we're going to look for a colour change in the tube against the colour squares on the pot. So you just pop the square end of the tube onto the white squares next to each blue square and check which colour it's nearest to. This one is right down at 0, there's no blue in there at all. If it does sit partway between the two, then go for the lower one. For the Westcountry Rivers Trust CSI scheme, we have thousands of surveys carried out over the years, and getting on for 1,000 already this year. So I've just got a few tips here to help you make the most of the data, record it in the most accurate way, and help us streamline the approvals process. The first thing is to make sure that you have the grid reference, time and date on the survey. We can't use the data if we don't know when or where it's from. There's a number of ways of finding the grid reference. You can click on the map on the survey data entry screen on Cartographer, or perhaps use an app on your phone, but we need it there. If you're in doubt, ask us where you are. If you can, fill out all the fields on the form. It's not necessary, but we can't assume that if you don't tick anything, you've not seen any wildlife, or you've seen no wildlife. It's a slightly different thing. So if you don't see any wildlife, make sure to tick the none box, and the same with pollution and problem plants. If you can, take some photographs, and we get quite a few where the photographs aren't uploaded fully, so make sure whenever you're uploading it, you wait till the photograph is fully uploaded before you submit the survey. Another thing is to make sure that each survey only contains the information that you saw on that survey occasion, if you like. So sometimes people will record every bit of wildlife they've ever seen at a site. I know it's tempting, but if you can just record what you see on the survey, that's fine. You can always, if you're out one day and you see something amazing like a water vole or an otter, you can always record that as a separate survey, but make sure it gets its own time, date and location again. When you're estimating the width and the depth and the flow speed of the river, try and do that at the same place. Otherwise you'll get misleading results if you take the width and depth at a shallow, slow moving bit and then the velocity at a faster part of the river. The new TDS meters, the total dissolved solids meters, they do take quite a while to stabilize the temperature, or to the temperature to reach the temperature of the water. So make sure that you've given it a couple of minutes and check that the reading isn't changing when you take the result. The phosphate test kit, we're looking for a colour change in the tube against the colour squares on the pot. Nothing to do with the strip. So when you take the strip out, pop it in your bag or in your pocket and read the colour change in the tube itself. And then be careful not to record pollution when it's actually a natural feature. So some people confuse kind of collapsing riverbanks with natural erosion of riverbanks. I think the collapsing riverbanks is particularly important in urban areas or where there's any infrastructure, roads or walls or railway lines that's in danger of being undermined. So bear that in mind too.